It's the Locked On Flyers podcast for Monday, August 21st. Your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content. They can't believe it's been 100 days of the Keith Jones and Danny Briere administration.
Yeah, that's nuts.
We are going to talk about what that administration has looked like so far, plus a new listener summer poll and our Nemesis of the week.
You're Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there. Thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen every day. I am Rachel Donner. You can find me on Twitter at rmiriam. I'm here as always with Russ Cohen, who's on all your favorite social media apps at Sportsology. As a show, we're on Instagram and Threads and Blue Sky at Locked On Flyers as well. You can subscribe or follow us for free over on YouTube or on the SiriusXM app. Anywhere you listen to podcasts, you'll get our latest episode as soon as it's available here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Russ, when the Flyers hired Keith Jones and Danny Briere and had a big press conference, I was thinking this feels a lot like a new political, like presidential administration being sworn in, and they're saying, here's our goals. And so even back then, I was like, let's, fast forward 100 days. And when it hits that day, we're going to check in on it and see how those first 100 days have gone for them. Because in a presidential administration, that kind of sets the tone for the goals and, what is the remit here for this organization. And so this is a good milestone to check in on them so far. And I think the first and biggest question is, at this point, do we know their goals?
I mean, we know that they are okay with a rebuild, so that's a goal. We know that they want to have a good culture. That's a goal that's sort of half met. I don't think it's fully met yet. And they also want to bring back whatever luster used to be with the Flyers, and I think that's only half met. I think they have more support from the fans than they did in the previous administration at the end, but I don't think it's overwhelming yet.
Yeah, I think that, they kind of started things off with a bang in terms of having that presser in the arena as opposed to, just in Voorhees or in offices or whatever.
Right.
They're like, we're going to talk about the future of this team exactly on the surface where the team plays, which I thought was a good thing symbolically. But I think, there's some mixed things here. Now, some of it, as we'll get to later in the show, a little bit circumstantial, but I do think that you're right, that one of the biggest things that they talked about was Ed Snyder's legacy and how that was going to be kind of a guiding force in things that they did in terms of the focus on success and the focus on building a strong personality and culture for this organization. And I think it's hard. Like, I don't say that it's an easy job, especially when you have sort of conflicting goals in terms of what that means in a rebuild in year one versus wanting to make things, flashy and build this culture, right? Because we know a lot of the players they just signed aren't going to be a part of that culture, right?
No, that's true. But some of the players they re-sign or just signed because they're older know about the Ed Snyder era too. One of my basic observations and really recommendations was to have a Founders Day, like really celebrate Ed Snyder, have his family in, run a lot of different people in and out to talk about him. They're not doing that. And I'm surprised. To me, that's low hanging fruit. That would be easy to do. And I do feel like the fans would respond to that. And I do think a lot of the older fans would really respond to that.
Yeah, it's something that I'm wondering if that comes along as part of the season or something along those lines comes along as like a special day in season. But I feel like they also, with tickets already on sale, if it were happening, might have announced it.
I think they would have. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's kind of like, I don't know. It could go either way there, but I do understand what you're saying. And I do think that, as far as what they've communicated, I think they've done a good job of communicating along the way. I feel like they've talked a lot about the specific reasoning behind some of the decisions that they have made. I think they've done a good job about talking with some of the free agent signings, like in terms of what do they bring to the team? What do they mean to the team in this year one of the rebuild? I think they've done a lot of really good work in terms of communication and kind of really telling the fans what they're doing here along the way. And I've liked a lot of that.
Yeah, I mean, and that has to continue because, when they start getting better to attract big name free agents, they're going to have to believe that I believe in it too. I think this organization can do that. I think they can get to the next level, or they're not going to sign in Philly. It's just that simple.
Yeah, I think so too. I think one of the other kind of themes of that opening presser that happened, it was in terms of understanding and appreciating fan sentiment. And what it has meant in terms of maybe some of the frustration and anger that has happened over the last couple of years. And Danny Briere said specifically, if there's one message he wants fans to hear, it's "you have our attention." And I do think that has carried through with some of the decisions they've made so far. I think they've swung big. They haven't necessarily connected, but they have swung big. And I think that has meant a lot to fans.
Yeah, I don't think it's served all fans, but I do think there are some that feel like, I've already bought in. I like what they're doing and everything. But the other component is the product on the ice. And so it's like a 50-50 thing. It's like last year, at the beginning, everything was great. John was talking up the team was playing over their heads, and then things started to sort of go downhill. And so now it's kind of like they're doing everything before the product that you see on the ice. And so now that's going to have a fact, that's going to, if you took a poll at the beginning of the year before they play, and then you take a poll in the middle of the year after they've, had a half a season, then you'd have a really, a better idea.
Yeah, I think, and again, in politics, they do the same thing. It's like approval ratings, right?
Yes.
And so I think the approval rating now is going to be much higher than it will be partway through the season due to the on ice product, just, exactly as you were just saying. But I do think that one of the other things we have talked about multiple times on this show is patience, in that, there's this initial good feeling and we think that they're starting off in the right direction, but we're going to have some patience because the team is not going to be great for this season and maybe next, right?
Yeah, and I think it could be longer than that. I think the one thing that I see is alarming, and I'm not trying to quell anybody's excitement. If you want to have that, that's fine. It's just you should look around the league and see how hard it is to really rebuild, and look at the teams that have been out of the playoffs for a very long time, like the Sabres. And they've all had good intentions too, and they've been doing everything right for 3 or 4 years at least now, and still haven't cracked it. And so you have to look at that and say, all right, just because the Sixers now, like I've been seeing these things online. Well, I think the Flyers could, make it to a conference final before the Sixers. Well, you might want to slow your roll on that one, because basketball is different. There's fewer players, and even though it doesn't look great today, you definitely could move up quicker in basketball than you can in hockey. And I do think, honestly, I think something that's not been addressed really by the media that much around the league is how much longer rebuilds really take now, because everybody sort of talks about like that 5-year thing, and you could look back and say, all right, maybe they're a year into it now if you want to be rosy about the Flyers. But again, I could point out 3 or 4 teams that have taken much longer than that.
Yeah, and I do think that Jones and Briere have communicated that to a large degree, that it's going to be a slower process than people think.
But they've never put a number on it, though. They didn't. Like Steve Yzerman did, and they didn't. That's just a fact.
Right. But I think that actually, the fact that they didn't put a number on it supports your initial point of that it takes longer than you
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
And so it's harder to put a number on it. But I think they've been very clear that this could take a longer time than people think. And maybe that's why they're not putting a number on it. So
Could
I
be.
think that's I think that's a positive, to be honest.
Okay.
But I do think that, there are some definite specific things that they have done so far that we should talk about as far as setting the tone and what this administration is looking like. And we are going to get to those coming up next.
Today's episode's brought to you by a product that I literally use every day, AG1. Maybe you're like me, you want to be healthy and eat well, but it's always easier said than done. That's no longer the case with AG1. AG1 is a foundational nutritional supplement that delivers comprehensive nutrients to support whole body health. With one delicious scoop of AG1 in a glass of water each day, you're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to help you start your day right. This blend of ingredients supports your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy, recovery, focus, and aging. It can be hard and expensive to keep track of multiple different supplements and vitamins, not to mention how hard it can be on your stomach. AG1 costs less than $3 a day. You're investing in your health, and it's cheaper than your cold brew habit. Right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. If a comprehensive solution is what you need from your supplement routine, then try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase. Go to drinkag1.com/NHL network. That's drinkag1.com/NHL network. Check it out.
On the Wednesday show, we will be reacting to the Locked On NHL Prospects guys assessment of the Flyers' organizational depth, plus your mailbag questions. So get them in via email at lockedonflyers@gmail. You can comment over on YouTube or send us a tweet at lockedonflyers. Russ, we were just talking about setting the tone and, taking steps that show some meaningful progress or laying the groundwork in this year one. And I think that they have had a decent number of accomplishments so far that have done that. I think, we talked about the opening press conference. Did it set the tone? Have they followed it? And, like we said, I think to a large degree they have.
Yeah, they have. Again, this is like, if you can't have a lot of action items in an off season, because in the off season you can only do so much. So I do think they're hamstrung by that too.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's like the timing. It's usually when teams fire people
Right.
and hire new ones because it makes sense from a process perspective. So, but I do think that they really worked very hard to make an impact this offseason. I think the biggest thing they accomplished, or at least were able to pull off, was the Proveroff trade, right?
Yes. That part was good, and we'll see in the end if it was the right decision. I can give you the pluses and minuses on both sides. I don't think, because of what happened with Pride Night, that really affected his play. I don't think it did at all. So I don't think that was a factor in the sense that, well, you had to get rid of him because of that. I know people were saying that, but I don't think that was really a reality. So, yeah, I mean, we'll see. There's also a financial component of this too. So if you look at what the Flyers tickets are selling for, like what they're asking, their ask is pretty low. Like they've come up with new, definitely lower price packages to try and get fans in there. So that's also going to be a way of measuring this, Rachel, is to see who's showing up for games. We don't know that yet.
No, we don't. I think, as far as the other things that they've done in terms of, big swings, like we talked about, was at the draft. And I think drafting Hitchcock was perhaps the biggest swing of the offseason.
Yeah, it was the biggest show of change for sure. And I think that's a big thing. Now, I think there's been an awful lot of hyperbole about Mitchkov. And honestly, you do have to sort of slow it down a little bit. I mean, again, I would get asked every year about Kaprizov, and And I did say, yes, he was the best player outside of the NHL. I don't know if for sure Mitch Kupp is yet. I need to see him another season to be able to state that the same way. I think it's going to be the case, but I really do need to see that. Like, there's some things you just have to kind of wait and see. And the rest is a lot of dreaming, but there's a lot there. Don't get me wrong. And it did show change. And all of that was really positive.
Yeah, and I think the draft overall was very positive. It wasn't just the Mitchkoff pick. I think that, I think, maybe jury's out on Bonk. We'll see what happens with him. But getting that second first round pick through the Proveroff trade, again, one of the other big swings was I think a pretty huge deal, especially because the Flyers did not have a second round pick in this draft. So it was important to get another quality pick, and they did that. I think trading up for Carson Bjarnason was a really wise move. We had talked at length about the lack of goalie depth, and they picked two goalies. So they listened to us, which, that's pretty good, right?
Yeah, no question. Yeah, so, I think those things are important. And I do think it's always hard to say, hey, they had a great draft when it's, so early into it. But I think the framework of it, made sense for sure. And again, honestly, the Mitchkoff pick, nobody's going to worry about. The pick that's going to be the one that everybody talks about will be the Bonk pick. That's the one that's either going to work out really well or it's not going to work out really well. And that's the one that gets talked about the most if you listen around.
Witness Jay OBrien, right?
Yeah.
So I think, that has the specter of that has sort of hung over this Bonk pick a little bit. But for every one of those, we have a Travis Konechny. So I'll take it.
Yeah. No question. It balances out.
Yep, it does. So I think that, aside from that, the other big swing that was attempted that did not happen, but I do think that they should get some credit for the swing is that big deal with St. Louis that did not go through, that wound up being just a small Kevin Hayes salary dump trade, right?
Yeah, they definitely set their sights high on deals like that, and even that D'Angelo deal would have been a nicer one than the way it turned out. And they definitely tried some things, and so you always have to give him points for that. There's no question he was working hard. Can I say Danny Briere was working harder than Chuck Fletcher? I can't, because maybe Chuck was going about it all the wrong way, but worked equally as hard. My dad would always say, you can work harder, you can work smarter, you can do both. And I think, Danny did both.
Yep, I think so too. I think really where we are now, 100 days in, the only things that I may have expected to have happened but hasn't is the Morgan Frost contract.
Yeah, it's a little alarming because now, and you're never going to know which side is holding it up. Is it the Frost side because they're trying to get every little bit out of the Flyers, or is it the Flyers because they like Frost, but they only like him for so many years and at a certain price? And right now, if I'm thinking about which way it is, I'm thinking that's probably the way it is, because I think they would have had them signed already long-term if there was a path to do it. So now I think it's just Frost camp probably trying to get the highest AAV they can on another short deal. And I think that's probably what we're looking at. And so my only thing is this. I think, and I could be wrong, I think my opinion of what Morgan Frost is right now is higher than what the Flyers think of him.
Yeah, that very well could be. I think it's just an unknown. And I think it's just maybe a slight tarnish on the overall picture of what this first 100 days has looked like in terms of setting the tone, in terms of making the right deals. I think they did a good job with all of the other RFAs and getting all of that done. So that's good. I think, in terms of...
Well, Ersan is the one that is the hardest to figure out, only because, again, goaltenders are hard to figure out. He is making a jump quicker than I think anybody would have wanted him to, but based on reality, it's just the way it is right now. And that extra year is like, okay, we'll see, because even though it's not for a lot of money, it's the thought process of it. Like, okay, now we've got him for 2 years. You hope in 2 years, you're like, yeah, well, we want him for another 2. If you don't, then it's like, we might have made a mistake here. So that's what you have to see.
Right. Right. So I think overall in this 100 days, like, was that a honeymoon period, or because of the nature of a rebuild, we don't look at it that way? But if it was a honeymoon period, is it now over?
No, it's not over because once a team announces that they're in rebuild mode, everybody sort of eases up on them a little bit with criticism. So like the media will ease up to a certain degree, because if you write something, then fans will be like, but they're rebuilding, So there is a point where they stop saying that, like they did with the Rangers and they did with other teams that have been rebuilding. But no, the honeymoon period's really not over, simply because once you state it, I always feel like you get like almost 2 years of grace
Right.
period for that.
No, I think you're right. I think that maybe, there'll be a little bit less pure optimism because,
Hmm.
again, it's a slog. The first couple of years of a rebuild are a slog. So the
Yeah.
pure optimism might go away, but the realistic nature of the fan base, I think, will absolutely come through and give these guys, 2 years to really understand what it is we're looking at in terms of the overarching plan for the future.
Yeah, I mean, it's just you always have to kind of look ahead in this, even as a fan, even though that may be hard to do because yes, you're spending money and you want to be entertained. I get it. I remember writing an article when John Tavares was drafted by the Islanders, saying before he was drafted, I was like, the Islanders have to draft him. He's the guy that could help bring them out of this mess, and to for the larger degree, he did. Now, Islander fans are going to say, well, he didn't, complete the mission or whatever, but he kind of did. It's just it was everything else around him that didn't work out. And I think the hope is that Hitchcock is that same guy. And so you're not going to know that for 3 years,
Right.
most likely.
Right.
And that's the difficulty here.
Yep. Well, I think that is a good precursor to what we're going to talk about in the next segment, which is our new summer poll question and our nemesis of the week. All right, Russ. So continuing our 100 days of the Jones and Briere administration conversation, jumping into this week's poll for y'all out there. We wanted to know, what do you think is the most important accomplishment of the new administration in their first 100 days? So your options are going to be drafting Matvei Mitchkov, player development and other hires to the group, the Proveroff trade, their opening press conference stating the goals and expectations, and then the free agency and RFA signings. So those are your 5 choices. There'll be a separate post to the episode over on YouTube. Give us your thoughts. If there's anything else that you think was a bigger accomplishment or more important, put those in the comments.
Yeah, it's a lot to think about.
Yeah, so can't wait to hear what y'all think about that. Moving over to our nemesis of the week. Last week, I talked about the wait for rookie and training camp. We're in this weird no man's land. It's still several weeks away, but excited to get going and see what some of the new prospects look like in camp. Very much looking forward to that. For me, I've got 2 nemesis this week, but the Flyers related one, we talked about this and you brought it up specifically in terms of comparing teams and rebuilds. For me, is getting sucked into that comparison, right? And looking at other teams as a benchmark when things have changed in the league so much that it's hard to tell, exactly to your
Yes.
point, Russ. And then, the Flyers are different. The Flyers are just in a different circumstance. So it's like apples and pears here. And
Yeah.
you just have to really be careful of that when evaluating this rebuild.
Although if I'm going to evaluate an apple or a pear, an apple's going to win every time. Pears suck.
Okay.
My nemesis is going to be weathermen in general, or weather person. So here's my problem with that job. My problem with the job is I think they shouldn't have any personality at all. And I'll tell you why. So we're all hoping that things aren't really, really bad in Southern California, but I watched a couple of weather reports, and after you get through the factual information, it was kind of like, but hey, it's going to be a nice day today until tonight. Then there's going to be all this flooding rain and everything. And it's like, don't give people the optimism that they should be outside walking their dogs and having fun in the park for the first 4 hours and then, holding on for dear life for the rest of the day. You know what I mean? Like there's a good balance there. Maybe do it like the Weather Channel and just say what's happening. See what you see and say what you see, and that's it. And don't interject any extra happiness or anything, because I think the message is the most important thing. And I felt like on the couple that I watched, the message got muddy because of like some happiness that sort of like was mixed in there, which right now it's a tense time there. And so I just felt like, just that position and all. I'm not a person. I don't know if you are, Rachel. I'm not a person that sits at home and waits until 10:22 or whatever until they show that weather report. I could get weather a million different ways, but I'm just saying when stuff's going to hit the fan, and I am going to hope that my local weather people, because they have Doppler 8000 helping, that, I'm going to get some answers. I want more answers than I do like opinion or even personality. Sorry.
Well, I think, there's a balance there. I think on, quote unquote, regular days, throw the personality in there.
Sure.
I know there's some really fun weather personalities out there. So, but if it's like a serious situation like this, then, maybe some extra thought should go into it and maybe tone it down a little bit. So I'm mostly with you there. My other nemesis this week is the MTA here in New York. Fares going up. $2.90 a ride, man. Oof.
It doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're doing it every day,
adds up.
It does add up. I will tell you though, it's a thankless job. I knew somebody that was a pretty high-ranking official with the NTA, and it's a thankless job. It's a hard thing to figure out. It's an amazing system. Like there's not that many subway systems that run like that in the world. There's England. There's a couple of cities like LA has a subway system. Does anybody use it? No. As an example.
Yeah. Well, that's a whole other thing with the car culture there. But
the cost I get. I do.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just like when it's like almost $3 a ride. So you think like round trip to get to work is like almost $6, which is like maybe slightly less than half of an hour of minimum wage take home pay. So that's like half an hour of your workday gone to just getting to work.
Yeah.
Like if you think about it that way, it's a little rough sometimes.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah. Love having a good public transit system where I live though. So wouldn't trade that for the world. All right. That will do it for today's show. Thanks so much for listening. Of course, like I said, we'll be back on Wednesday looking at the Flyers prospect depth. As a reminder, we always want to hear from you. So send in your mailbag questions at Locked On Flyers on Twitter. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail.com or comment over on YouTube. I'm Rachel. I'm on Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ. I'm at Sportsology, SPORTSOLOGY.
Have a great day, everyone.